Good morning. A year or so ago, the American Ornithological Society announced they were planning to change the common bird names that were named after individuals to something more socially acceptable. Believe it or not, as an old white guy, I am actually pretty much in favor of this. I think that would be much more educational and accessible to the public instead of people wondering who this guy or that guy was. Why is the bird named that? So I think this is a good idea. However, there have been a couple of these done already, a couple of bird name changes in recent years. Most notably, the McGowan's longspur was renamed to thick-billed longspur, and the Mew gull was named short-billed gull. And I'm thinking, do we really want to trust people who come up with names like that to rename all the birds? I don't think so. As a public service, therefore, I've decided to go through my photographs, and any birds that have names that are likely to be changed, I'm going to propose some new ones of my own. Hope that's helpful. Couple words of warning. First, I have no illusions that I'm the smartest of people at the American Ornithological Society. So that's just a given. So my names may not quite match the scientific muster they're looking for, but I'm hoping they're at least a little more accessible than thick-billed. Another word of warning is I'm going to try to inject a little humor into this subject, if at all possible. I'm not sure that is, or how well that will be received. But I'd like to see us not take ourselves quite so seriously. One thing I would like us to remember, this I hope will be my only political comment in this, is that people are flawed, and history changes. What's acceptable once is not acceptable now and shouldn't be acceptable now. I'm not going to go back and try to defend any person from the past. I would like us all to remember that whether you're Washington or Lincoln or Susan B. Anthony or Martin Luther King or Ronald Reagan or Barack Obama, no matter which side of which fence you're on, all people have some things in their past that are perhaps not acceptable and perhaps will be much less acceptable in the future. That's why I generally don't like naming monuments and bridges and airports and stuff after people. Just never seemed like a good idea. But that's it for me. I don't guess I have to worry about anything being named after me after all. I'd also like to mention that I may drop in a little history that I will have pulled from this book on American bird names that my daughter loaned me. It's really fascinating. So no matter what sins our forefathers have, there's still some interesting stuff in here. And this book doesn't concentrate on the sins. It concentrates on the ornithological explanations of the bird names. I'm guessing this might be out of print. If it's not out of print, you might want to look one up. It's pretty fascinating. It's a really good book. So I'll try to quote from this some. If I blow it up, then the smart part of the quote is from the book. The dumb part of the quote will be something I had lived. Okay, let's get started. Yet another caveat. I am checking eBird to see if any of the names I suggest are duplicates, but I might mess up, but we'll hope not. The birds that are supposed to acquire new names in 2024 are Maui parrotbill and Inca dove, which I won't address here, not people names. I hope to do a future video on that kind of stuff.
And Townsend solitaire, Townsend's warbler, Scott's oriole, and Bachman's sparrow. Townsend's warblers are western warblers with a strong black and yellow striped face pattern, so I would propose yellow striped warbler. For the Townsend solitaire, I like mountain solitaire. I saw one person propose juniper solitaire, but that seems a little plant specific. I see them in the mountains away from juniper trees. Scott's oriole. Many of the color pattern names are taken, so let's go with desert oriole. I see him in the desert. Heard the Bachman sparrow singing in the Florida palmettos. Let's call it palmetto sparrow.
Incidentally, my little bird name book said Bachman was a minister whose two daughters married Audubon's two sons. So that's how Audubon used his name. I didn't read what got him on the bad person list, but I hope it wasn't being a minister in and of itself. You never know.
Allen's hummingbird. As near as I can tell from the eBird range map, these are only along the California coast, so let's call it coastal hummingbird. Anna's hummingbird. Guess even the girls lose their names. How about pink-headed hummingbird? That describes this pretty well.
The Anna in Anna's hummingbird was the wife of a French prince who was the son of one of Napoleon's marshals. The book says Audubon met her in Paris and found her charming and beautiful.
Audubon's oriole. Well, this seems like a significant name to change, but let's do it. The yellow and black oriole names are pretty used up, so let's go with a range. It's a kind of a Tex-Mex bird, so let's call it the Rio Grande oriole. Baird's sandpiper. Boy, this is harder than I thought. All I can come up with is long-winged sandpiper. Baird's sparrow is a tricky one. Buff-headed sparrow, perhaps?
Baird was a friend of Audubon and his family who became Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, first United States Fish Commissioner, and organizer of zoological work for the Pacific Railroad surveys.
Barrow's goldeneye. Perhaps crescent-faced is the most accurate, but clunky. Let's just call it the crescent goldeneye.
Barrow, as in Barrow's goldeneye, is for Sir John Barrow, who was a founder of the Royal Geographic Society and a Secretary of the Admiralty.
I often hear Bell's sparrow singing in the desert, so how about tumbleweed sparrow?
Bell is for John Graham Bell, who was a New York taxidermist that accompanied Audubon on his Missouri River trip of 1843.
Buick's wren. I've seen long-necked and long-tailed. Let's use long-tailed wren. That'll probably work best for most folks.
Once again, Thomas Buick was a friend of Audubon's who wrote and engraved the History of British Birds.
Blackburny and warbler. Let's go for the obvious. Orange-throated warbler. Bobolink. Well, why not Tom O'Link or Mary O'Link or Beyonce O'Link or Juanita O'Link? Oh, the Bob doesn't mean that? Well, then just stick with bobolink. That's fine.
I never did find out who Bob was.
Bonaparte's gull. They'll probably call it something like thin-billed. I hate bills in names. I like black-eared. Let's use black-eared gull.
Bonaparte. This is an interesting one. It's not Napoleon. It's the son of Napoleon's younger brother, whose wife Zenaida was the daughter of Joseph, Napoleon's older brother. We'll get to Zenaida later.
Bottery's sparrow. Flat-headed doesn't really sound good. How about plain-breasted sparrow? Brewer's blackbird. At first I thought golden-eyed blackbird, because that's often how I tell it, but lots of blackish birds have golden eyes, so why not shiny blackbird? We have a shiny cowbird, why not a shiny blackbird? Brewer's sparrow. Well, sagebrush sparrow was already taken, so the best I've got is gray-breasted sparrow. Buller's shearwater is a tough one. I couldn't think of any great wording to describe its wing pattern, so let's go with white-throated shearwater.
Buller is for Sir Walter Buller, a New Zealander who is a lawyer by profession who became a great authority on New Zealand birds.
Brandt's cormorant. The most consistent identifying mark I could find, I think, is the buff throat. Let's call it buff-throated cormorant. Bullock's oriole. Not too hard now that it's not a Baltimore oriole anymore. How about black-browed oriole? Credit to my daughter Emily for that one. Casson's kingbird. I don't have too many that refer to their song or their voice, but this is one, we hear them all the time at my house. We have a bunch. Let's call it chirping kingbird. They're really fun to listen to. Casson's auklet. My first thought was chunky auklet, but that probably won't fly. Best I can do is gray auklet. That's better than dull auklet, eh? Casson's finch. Rosy-crowned finch seems to fit best. People might get them confused with the rosy finches, but they'll figure it out. Casson's vireo. Ever since the solitary vireo group got busted up, this one's been a little problem. It's kind of in between. You can't call it in between or intermediate vireo. Maybe olive vireo, even if you use olive tiny vireo for Huttons.
This one's kind of interesting. John Casson, curator of ornithology at the Academy of Natural Sciences of Philadelphia. To list several expeditions he'd gone on with others, including the Perry expedition to Japan.
Clark's nutcracker, another Lewis and Clark casualty. Let's use mountain nutcracker. I only see them in the mountains.
Clark refers to Captain William Clark of Lewis and Clark fame. Must admit, it feels a little funny to lose the history of Lewis and Clark in the bird names, but gotta follow the pattern. Though people will still remember Lewis and Clark, I'm sure.
Couch's kingbird. I apologize for this one, but it's the best I can do. There's already a thick-billed kingbird, so maybe call this one short-billed kingbird. Once again, my apologies. Crevary's murrelet. Murrelets are tough. How about gray-winged murrelet? Those gray wings are what they key us on the pelagic trips. Forster's tern. This is another one where I think the winter plumage has to govern. Let's use masked tern. Gamble's quail. Perhaps yellow belly, but don't like that. How about red-crowned or red-capped? Yeah, red-crowned. Grace's warbler. These yellow-faced warblers may be tricky. Let's use yellow-browed warbler.
Dr. Elliot Coos, who's famous in birding ornithology history circles, I've never heard of him, but he's famous, I'm sure, requested that it be named after his sister Grace. I'm sure Grace never did anything to hurt anyone, I hope.
Hammond's flycatcher. I'm going to go a little out of bounds here. These empids are hard to describe, but why not just put that right in the name and call this one Fork-tailed impid flycatcher. Hierman's gull. It'll probably be stuck with white-headed gull, something like that. But really, if it was up to me, I'll call it beautiful gull. It's the best. Hudsonian godwit. Another bird, hard to find a distinct feature, but it is the smallest. Let's call it least godwit. We have least sandpipers. Why not a least godwit? Kitslitz murrelet. Several of these little guys need new names. Let's try speckled murrelet.
There actually was someone named Kitslitz, a German naval officer and explorer, whose account of his work in Kamchatka and Alaska was published in 1858. Go to Alaska to find a Kitslitz murrelet.
LeConte's sparrow. Meadow sparrow seems most pleasant, but yellow-faced seems more accurate. I'd go with yellow-faced. LeConte's thrasher. I kind of want to call it nemesis, but pale thrasher really works better. Lewis's woodpecker. I kind of hate to lose the reference to Old Merriweather, but since it's red and purple, why not magenta woodpecker? I like that. Lincoln's sparrow. This one seems cleaner. Buff-breasted is the field mark I use. Buff-breasted sparrow.
Lincoln Sparrow was not named for Abraham Lincoln. It was named for Thomas Lincoln, a 21-year-old young man who accompanied Audubon on his trip to the coast of Labrador. These sparrows must get around. We've got them in California. Labrador's a long way off.
Lucifer hummingbird. Tough for me to describe this. I haven't seen it very well, but Sibley says they like agave plants, so why not agave hummingbird? This one is tricky, the McGillivray's warbler. It's very much like the eastern mourning warbler, but found in the west and in the mountains. So perhaps mountain mourning warbler? The white arcs on its eyes are distinctive, but hard to call something an arced warbler. Maybe broken-eyed warbler. That's the best I got. Nettles woodpeckers are very similar to the ladderback woodpeckers, but with a darker face. So let's go with black-faced woodpecker. Ross's goose. This one, let's go a whole new direction. Let's call it lesser snow goose and call the snow goose the greater snow goose. That way we don't need to talk about differences in their lips or head shape or things like that. Steller's jay. Let's not make this one too hard. How about black-crested jay?
Steller's jay is named for George Steller, who accompanied Vitus Bering, the Danish explorer of Bering Sea fame, who was employed by Russia to determine if Siberia and Alaska were connected, which of course they're not. Steller has the extinct sea cow, a sea lion named after him, an eider.
Sabin's gull. This one has to include something about its wings. How about wedge-winged gull? Say's phoebe. One article I saw had a proposal of black-tailed phoebe. Come on, we can do better. They also listed cinnamon phoebe, but I think I might go with cinnamon-bellied phoebe. That's a little more descriptive. Scripps murrelet. Close to the crevaries without the gray wings. Let's use white-necked murrelet. Swainson's hawk. It's a little tricky to find a distinct feature on these. They share features with so many other hawks. Comes down to white-chinned, but I don't like that. How about dark-breasted? Swainson's thrush. Sibley refers to spectacles, but there already is a spectacled thrush, and it's seen really more places than the mountains. Since they breed in the conifers, let's call it a conifer thrush. Williamson's sapsucker. We already have a yellow-bellied, so why don't we call this one black and yellow sapsucker? Wilson's snipe. This is very similar to the common snipe of Europe. It's hard to find a distinguishing feature, so let's go with habitat. Believe it or not, there isn't a marsh snipe, so let's use it here. Marsh snipe. Wilson's phalarope. Several choices available here based on habitat, such as inland phalarope or prairie phalarope. Prairie phalarope sounds best, I think. Wilson's storm petrel. Several of these storm petrels have white rumps, but this one's really common, so let's try it. White-rumped storm petrel. Wilson's warbler. Perhaps the easiest bird on this task list. Black-capped warbler.
Wilson, Alexander Wilson, came to the U.S. from Scotland in 1794 and is known as the father of American ornithology. He's a predecessor to Audubon by a little bit. He had a snipe, a warbler, a plover. A number of birds were named for him. It said he was a great ornithologist with a talent for art, while Audubon was a great artist with a little talent for ornithology. I'm not sure what that means. Zenaida dove. This one hurts a little. This one was named after the wife of one of Napoleon's nephews, as I've already mentioned. And interestingly enough, the genus name for doves is Zenaida. So I always liked, when I was in Puerto Rico, and Zenaida doves are very common in Puerto Rico, seeing what I thought of as the dove, the Zenaida dove. So I guess they make it to Florida some, and the AOS feels obligated to change the name, but I kind of hope they change it to Dove. Wouldn't that be fun? Well, I hope you found it interesting to hear a little bit of the history of some of the people involved. I just covered some of the good history. There's plenty of bad history. I'm sure I don't know all of that at all, and I'm not denying it's there. Like I said, even as an old white guy, I think we ought to change the names, but more from the standpoint of let's use names that describe the birds a little better and help beginners understand and find them. Don't give them some field marks to look for. Let's have a positive approach to this, huh? Hope you enjoyed this video. I'd like to do another one or two in the future. I don't really love names like American this or that, and Northern this, Western that. We can do better. So look forward to that video, I hope.